So what's going on is that Rishi Sunak has had his first proper reshuffle, just over 100 days into his time as Prime Minister. Now, in some ways, it was thrust upon him by the fact he had to sack Nadhim Zahawi as Conservative Party chair 8 days ago. You remember that early Sunday morning sacking, thanking him for his service after the allegations over Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs and what was going on in terms of what Nadhim Zahawi was telling permanent secretaries while he was Chancellor and in other jobs. So Nadhim Zahawi was out, and Rishi Sunak has really taken his time to have a bit of a broader look at the changes that he's wanted to make. And he's actually made a series of what are in effect quite under the bonnet changes to the way his government is going to work, ways in which it interacts, in particular with business. So if there was a problem over here with the Conservative Party chairman, he's actually used it to solve a whole series of problems that he thinks exist over here to do with business and energy and digital strategy and stuff like that. So what he's done is he's remoulded Whitehall in his own image to basically to allow him to have greater flexibility on things that he thinks need more attention. So at the heart of today's reshuffle has been the decision to basically break up the business department, which previously under Grant Shapps did all sorts of things, but also, as well as dealing specifically with business, also had a focus on energy policy and climate policy, and also was detached from some things to do with digital strategy. So he's as it were, sort of moved all of those things around. So he has created a new department for energy security and net zero. So that's the first big new department that he's created, and that has Grant Shapps, the TV regular, former Conservative Party chair, former business secretary under Rishi Sunak, big transport secretary for many years under Boris Johnson, big player, big beast around the cabinet table. So Grant Shapps takes that energy and climate change brief with a new department for energy, security and net zero. And then what they do is they leave the business department and wrap in the trade department. So if you remember, there was a Department for International Trade, the Secretary of State, first it was Liz Truss, then it was Anne-Marie Trevelyan, would go around the world trying to strike trade deals. Rishi Sunak has decided that it's a bit of a nonsense to have that separated out from the business department, since many of the decisions that the Trade Secretary has to make impact the Business Secretary as well. That's a long-running tension inside Whitehall. He's decided that tension must end, that division must end. So he has brought together the trade brief together with the business brief and given that to Kemi Badenoch, who until this morning was the Trade Secretary, was meant to be going on a mission to Rome, we believe, and she will now oversee both business and trade. There she is, you can see her on her screens, often thought to be, in the event that there's yet another leadership contest, one of the front runners. So she is another newish, very big beast around the cabinet table. Then the next thing he has done is he has separated out from the business department all of the sort of science briefs and is now putting that together with the digital elements that were previously in the culture department. Whitehall, slightly messy in the way that it cut all these things up. So what Rishi Sunak's trying to do is bring together science, innovation and digital strategy in one place. And Michelle Donelan, who was Culture Secretary, is now going to be in charge of that. So think of that as being in charge of things like online harms bill. I think that will sit within that government department. The science strategy, how do you boost innovation? Some overlap there with the new business department, but I think science, innovation and technology. This was one of the big ideas that was championed by William Hague, Lord Hague, who basically is one of Rishi Sunak's mentors. Rishi Sunak inherited the Richmond in Yorkshire seat from William Hague. He's been championing for some kind of science and digital mash-up within Whitehall. That's what's been delivered this morning. So that leaves a vacancy. The only new cabinet minister right now is Lucy Frazer. I think she was one of the housing ministers in the housing department. She will now join the cabinet table. She will be Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. So that's taking the culture brief to what it was back 5 years ago. So DCMS, Culture, Media and Sport, losing the digital bit. So essentially a department focused on the arts and sport. That reorganisation has meant some policy has been, as it were, delayed. We've got, I think, various elements that sit in there that haven't yet been announced that were expected quite recently. So Whitehall reorganisation's having something of a delay. And then the final big change is Greg Hands is going to replace Nadhim Zahawi as the Conservative Party chair. Greg Hands, a Hammersmith MP. He's been a veteran of the Cameron government, and subsequently he will now take to the airwaves to defend the government and basically play a leading role championing it. So a big role for a London MP. It's interesting that they've gone for a London MP as Conservative Party chair, where so much of the battleground is outside of the capital at the next general election. So what does it all amount to? What's the big picture here? Well, what it shows is that Rishi Sunak still thinks that there is quite a lot of, as it were, technocratic, small decisions, under-the-bonnet decisions needed to get his government in fine working order in order to get policies in place, decisions made, and improve things ahead of the next election. A lot of this will, in headline terms today, not be that important for the way that the public deal with government, but quite important behind the scenes in order to try and give better focus on key things like digital policy, energy policy, and to stop that separation between business and international trade deals. But, Jane, there's a problem, which is this is involving a lot of Whitehall civil servants and structures being moved around and messed around. And that is going to mean there's an awful lot of delay in terms of just getting people in new departments, in new seats, in new reporting structures. It's basically gum up government for a little bit, because if you move around parts of Whitehall in order to do as it were, a sort of government machinery of government change, that does actually slow effectiveness down. It does make it a little bit harder to get things done as civil servants and ministers get used to their new brief. So there might not be instantaneous benefits from this Whitehall shake-up at once, because of the complexity of moving all these bits of Whitehall around and creating new structures. But Rishi Sunak thinks that he's got the time to do it and it'll deliver the results. So showing that he's still got very much his hand on the technocratic tiller when it comes to reshaping his government. These are changes that he might have done earlier, but when he came in in November, just over 100 days ago as Prime Minister, he perhaps felt he had to keep things broadly the same, because the situation that Liz Truss left behind was so, as it were, unstable that he needed to keep the structures in place. This is the blueprint for the government that he wants to run. Familiar faces in the main, cabinet ministers in the main taking up the new jobs, and Greg Hands, the media-savvy face, now the new Conservative Party chairman.